So finally, on graphing activity number 3, which has the following data about diabetes and time after eating and glucose levels of 2 different people, you're going to input the data the same way as you did for plant A and plant B. So what that would mean would be if you input in cell A1 time after eating, you would type that in, and remember that's in hours. And then type in the times after that. And then next to it you would put person A's blood glucose levels and person B's, and then highlight all of the information. You'll get a graph that's very similar to this one. The only difference here is that you can see this is not the data that it should look like. So although I do have my x-axis correct, right, time after eating, right, and their blood glucose depends on the time, and I have my red line representing person B and my blue line representing person A, this y-axis should not be correct. And this is also not correct, the title of the graph. So I want to go back and show you a couple of things that are a little bit different in this particular graph. So I'm going to rename it, of course, the title. That's something for you to come up with. Don't just leave it as graph 3. Scroll down, and there's a couple of settings that I changed. So if I want to change the y-axis label, right, I'm going to change it from left vertical, and I'm going to put what the y-axis is. So it's something about blood glucose, if you remember. Okay, so just type it in just the way that it says in the data itself. And then if you scroll down further, there's a couple of things, go back to horizontal axis. If you scroll down further, what I did was change something right here. This is in the same category of time after eating. You can see that minimum is blank, which I had put 0, it just erased it, and the maximum is 4. And what's that's going to do is going to evenly space all of these numbers so that they're not 0.6 and 1.8 and whatever. They're going to be evenly spaced. Okay? So that's something to change. And if you scroll down, you can make sure that everything else looks right. But in general, if I wanted to change some of these lines, like person A and person B, and change the color, I could do that. Okay? So this is something you need to think about when creating graphs. And then finally, what I want you to do, you'll notice that at the bottom of the instructions it says determine the sum and average of person A and B's blood glucose levels. So you want to do that across the total number of hours, right, from 0.5 hours to 4. And so what I want you to do is we have 8 different time points or so, 7 or 8, and I don't even want you to count them. What I want you to do is use the functions that are available to you in Google Sheets. So if I want to take the entire sum, right, I'm taking a total, I could just add these up in my head or with a calculator, but instead I'm going to let Google Sheets do that for me. So there's a couple ways to do it. I could type in the function that I wanted to use, or I can identify it under this sum function tool. So if I click on functions, I want to use sum. So if I will click sum, and you can see what it does is it gives you an equals at the very beginning and then a parentheses. So it's asking me to highlight or type in from what value to the next value do I want the sum to be. So I'll show you what that looks like here. I'll click on cell B2, scroll all the way down to highlight all the way to B8, and then I'll release and click enter. And you could see that it gave me the sum. Now, if I accidentally let it go too early, you can see that in the toolbar up above, it tells me what's in the cell. I could change it from B8 to B7 if I mess that up. Okay, so I want that to be to B8. The next thing I'm going to do is take an average. So an average would be if I add up all the values and then divide by the number of values, correct? So in this case, I would use the function called average. It's that easy. So I'm going to highlight the cell that I want the information to go into. That in this case is going to be B11, and I want to take the average of person A's blood glucose levels. So again, I go back to the functions tool. It's a capital sigma, and I'll click average. And I'll do the same thing. I'll drag it down from the starting to the ending value, just like I did before, release, and click enter. And you can see that it gave me an average value. And then I would do the same thing for person B's blood glucose levels as well. So that pretty much wraps up the tutorial on using Google Sheets. Please try to remember how to use the sum and average tool as you'll be using them in the future. Good luck.